Hello, America, and welcome to another episode of the Ultra MK podcast, where together we are reversing the narrative. I'm your host, Matt Kennedy, and on today's show, we have an amazing guy who is a great American patriot who's born and bred in California, and he is running for United States Congressional District number 47 out of Southern California. He hails from the city of Irvine and grew up and spent much of his life in Laguna Beach. We have on the show today Mr. Michael Maxsenti.
That is our obligation, to inform and alert the American people, to make certain that they possess all the facts that they need and understand them as well, the perils, the prospects, the purposes of our program, and the choices that we face.
How you doing, Michael?
Hello, Matt. It's good to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great. Thanks for joining the show. It's so cool getting to know you. I believe we started crossing paths in the fall of 2025 last year. And when I was working down in Southern California with Peace of Heaven, the nonprofit, and we have
Right.
mutual friends down there in Newport Beach. And it was great to be able to meet with you and kind of find out about your passion for making a change within politics and your background and your beliefs. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today. And can you tell us a little bit about what made you want to run for California politics?
Yeah, and before I get into that, I'd like to comment on the friends, the mutual friends that we have, because it brought us together over the issue of child trafficking and how to deal with that. And that is a hugely important issue. It's my wife's number one issue, probably, is it would be how do we solve that? And that's something that I'm really honored to have our mutual friend. And I know the work that you're doing and others to help not just bring that to light, but how to help those children as they're being rescued. So thank you for what you're doing and for what so many are doing to help us uh, deal with this horrific issue.
It is a horrific issue. And I know for me personally, God downloaded information to me heavily um, just just as the lockdowns were happening, as they did for many Americans and people around the world, when they shut down society for they said slow the spread for 2 weeks, which was nonsense because it ended up they wanted it to last for 2+ years, but no, God really came to me in those weeks, in those moments, and showed me a lot of things and helped me understand the underbelly of the beast that we're fighting against. And child trafficking, I feel, is the number one issue that will not only unite people who may be divided on other political or social issues, because we all came from a mother's womb. We were all children at one time, and we want to protect our own children. So I feel that that is a topic that I feel will wake up a lot more people in weeks and months to come, especially in California, where it is the number one state of the union that has the highest per capita cases of children in slavery and sex slavery and beyond. So I appreciate that you making that a top priority with your campaign.
Yeah, it's a hugely important issue to deal with. And I think that the growth of it and the awareness of it is a direct result, in my opinion, of the fact that you have now concentrated the wealth of so many people have this immense wealth. And when you have that kind of wealth and you don't have to interact as a normal person working for a living, going to a job, you get off into these weird doing all kinds of weird things. And and so that's where this trafficking and this and the abuse of children for others' pleasure somehow is a direct result of where our cultural breakdown has been, starting with the family, but this issue of concentration of wealth. And I draw people's attention to those books, The Hunger Games, uh, that when the author of those books, when she wrote those, and she made it real clear, those books were written to help wake up the millennial generation and others to the long-term consequences of the path we are on. And if you look over the past, I think it's about 20 years since those books came out and the movies then it's followed, uh, you can clearly see the movement towards that type of dystopian future where this immense concentration of wealth and the rest of everybody are enslaved to their pleasure. Uh, and so we've got a lot more to talk about, but that's something that we have to get our nation as that beacon on the hill turned back towards its founding principles, towards greater freedom. I mean, the experiment that we are of self-governance, and that's the uniqueness of our Constitution that was so incredibly advanced. It took us on a step that advanced society farther than ever before, where we self-govern, or do we need dictators, rulers, monarchs, people who have power to oppress us? And here, 150 years after the founding of our nation, we had Abraham Lincoln come along because we were at a very similar period that we are today, where we had a nation divided, where we had half of the states who were willing to destroy the Union so that they could protect their economic engine based on slavery, to protect the plantation owners and the wealth that they had on the backs of slave labor. And you had Abraham Lincoln and the people from the Union side who were willing to die in huge numbers to save our country and free the slaves. And we today are in a very similar position. And people will say, and free the slaves? Most people can see how divided the nation is, but we're at a very critical point. Can we, 100 years later, step up and save our country and this ongoing experiment for self-government, rather than fall back into the need of monarchs, kings, etc., and free the slaves? And today's people, the vast majority of Americans, are they're on the modern plantation of slavery. They're enslaved because of their dependency on government, or they're enslaved through debt. And that's where we have to get our nation back on track, moving back towards and back onto the principles of our founding of our nation so that we can save our country today. And Abraham Lincoln's, the way he did it, his team of rivals approach, when he brought on his four biggest rivals onto his cabinet and then brought in other people that had very opposing views, his belief and it's a great book for people to read if they really want to know the best story. And I've read a number of books on Lincoln, but The Team of Rivals, the book called The Team of Rivals, he brought these people onto his cabinet. He surrounded himself with tremendously strong-willed people of different perspectives so that he could get the benefit of their thinking to help make the best decisions possible to move our nation through that civil war, to save our nation and free the slaves. And he was successful. What Trump and Kennedy coming together did is exactly that same thing in modern terms, bringing together people to create a coalition, strong people with very different perspectives, willing to work together, listen together to save our country and free our modern day slaves. And so that when that bell went off, when they came together on August 23rd, that's when a bell went off for me of excitement, saying, wow, this is what we need today. And then when it was the vote, when we won the election on November 5th and the vote was certified on January 6th, during that 2-month window, Matt, every morning I would pray, God, what is the journey you've put me on? What is the most important thing I can contribute to this effort? And then after the vote was certified, over the next 4 days, it became crystal clear, knowing politics, and we'll get into that in a minute, that the midterms coming up were absolutely crucial to keep this reform effort going. Uh, because if we don't hold the majority in Congress, everyone in the reform community on all of these issues, whether it be child trafficking, taxation, drug abuse, or government waste, healthcare, on and on, the list is immense. All of the reform efforts on that will be ground to a halt, just like they were when Trump and they took over in the midterms in 2018. Um, so that's where I decided to run for Congress. It's a long way around giving an answer to your question, why am I running? But that's the answer is because it's absolutely essential that we hold Congress to continue with the reforms that our nation so desperately needs, our people, I and you and all of our people need.
I agree, Michael. I love your perspective. I love your vitality and your perspective of how you see the country going and what you're going to be able to do once elected. And let's just rewind a little bit because I want the viewership to know not just about you, but who your constituency is and where they would live. Because if this episode maybe gets shared with people that are in your district, let's list off all those cities that you would then represent of people who would be voting for you because I would love to see you win your campaign so that way you can really help our administration get the country back on track. So let's talk about District 47. What's that region of Southern California?
So post Prop 50, and our district was typified. We used to have 5 cities in this district. Now there are 12 cities we touch in this district. District 47 is basically it's the southern 20% of Newport Beach, all of Laguna Beach, and all of Irvine. That's all that remains of the former 47 district. Now, what's added to that is most of Tustin, Foothill Ranch, Lake Forest, Aliso Viejo, Laguna Woods, Laguna Hills, Laguna Niguel, uh, Dana Point, Capistrano Beach, and about 20% of Mission Viejo. Uh, all of those areas. So it's a bigger geographic area, but now it has incorporates 12, touches into 12 cities.
And most of those cities, correct me if I'm wrong, are Orange County cities, correct?
We're the only district in Orange County that's totally within Orange County. All of the other congressional districts now have been broken apart and separated where they touch at least one other county. Most of them have 2 and 3 counties that they're in. We're the only Orange County based, totally constrained within Orange County district left.
I think it's great for us to explain our state and how it's set up because California when people think about it other than just the stereotypes what the way I look at California is it's like its own country amongst 49 other countries and because of the amount of GDP and our budgets, the population density, the geopolitical landscape, the socioeconomic um, differences between coastal, inland, northern to southern. It is to me like its own country, So California is very diverse like that. And Orange County, for those who don't really know the geographic regions of California, Orange County is typically it's semi-conservative region. There's military bases that are there in Orange County. They were really out vocal and spoken out about some of the COVID mandates and things like that in Orange County. So can you talk more just upon just the constituency that you have and some of the things that they've been known to fight against when it comes to the political ideologies of California? Because California isn't just a blue state that's very liberal and left leaning. We have diversity here. We have people that are conservatives here, right, Michael?
Oh, absolutely. And District 47, those cities that I just mentioned, have quite a diversity from very liberal areas such as Laguna Beach and a part of the coastal zone where people of means and privilege, not privilege, people who've earned wealth for various ways, but are able to afford to live on the coastal zone. Uh, in general, there's more liberals there by far, people, because they're not immersed in the day-to-day struggles of so many other people. But then as you move inland and you move up into Tustin and Santa Ana, I forgot to mention Santa Ana. We have a good constituency in Santa Ana. Uh, you move up into Santa Ana, Tustin, and then these eastern parts of the southern part of Orange County. You have mostly families, and these families are struggling just to make ends meet with both people in the houses working. The biggest issue for everybody, outside of those people who've earned and have the wealth, uh, is affordability, without a doubt. And that affordability in California is first and foremost driven by the housing market. Second to that is the cost of healthcare. The cost of healthcare is immense for families. Uh, and then on top of that, the next biggest thing is energy, from gasoline to electricity bills and gas bills. They've gone through the roof. And so people struggle. And these are things that didn't just happen. And this is where I'm fighting against, because career politicians and those people who elected, these problems didn't just pop up. They've been growing steadily while our elected officials looked the other way, gave us lip service to what they would do to solve them, but never did. Every election cycle, people running for office come before us and they do their surveys. They know exactly what the issues are. They do all of their testing, A/B testing, and how to say the exact right words. And they come to us and ask for our votes and tell us all the things they're going to do. And then what in the heck have they done? They go back to Sacramento or they go back to Washington and they cave in to the special interest money, uh, and at best will give us nothing more than lip service on the names of fancy sounding bills that are going to attack corruption, are going to attack the cost of living, etc., deal with our taxes. And what are the results? The problems just grow worse. They grow more entrenched in controlling our system and their ability to get elected and reelected. The special interests and the big, huge corporations and others continue to grow more and more wealthy, immense wealth. And our middle class has been decimated. Uh, and so, uh, to the ideological thing, most people, though, if you put aside these superficial ideological differences, all have similar wants and desires. They want to be loved, they want to be respected, they want to have a family, they want to enjoy life. Uh, uh, and we have been purposefully divided over these issues, social issues and ideological issues, to keep us divided so that we keep electing these people into office, so they can just continue on their merry way. And we continued to shrivel up and lose our freedoms and struggle to survive more and more.
I completely agree, and I see it the same way too, Michael. And I think that we have to look for our common interests amongst political division, because that's the social construct that the deep state has created nationwide, worldwide, and especially in California. And I see that one of the things that we all have in common is the cost of living, because I don't care where you are on the political aisle. We all have to pump gas. We all have to buy groceries. We all have to rent or buy a home. And I am feeling that all taxpayers are feeling not just the pinch, but they're very frustrated with what they're seeing in other states like Minnesota, where they had the daycare fraud scheme with the Somalis that they stumbled upon. And now it seems as if the White House is setting their sights on California because of all of the massive amounts of billions of dollars of fraud situations that they have been finding with the bullet train that they've been working on for many, many years, since 2008. We have, since the Biden administration, we had open borders. They were giving free healthcare to illegal immigrants coming into the country. What else were they doing? Mismanaging fire aid in a lot of the pockets that have been burned out of Southern and Northern California. And I think it's running up a tally. They're coming up to the numbers right now between like 70 and $75 billion worth of fraud that they have found. And that's from a bipartisan source. These are uh, auditors. These are state auditors that are blowing the whistle on California. And so I feel that all taxpayers statewide in California are really upset as to the information that they're finding out. And so let's talk about should you become elected, are these going to be some of the things that you would work to help, bring justice for people who are seeing fraudulent cases and people that are essentially stealing taxpayer dollars in order to, self-gain, in this system?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where this issue of accountability is of the three major themes of the campaign. The first and foremost, which is affects everybody's life daily, is as we just were talking about affordability. The second part of that theme is how do we make America healthy again, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, economically, environmentally, focusing on real results there, but accountability in government. Uh, that is a huge issue that has been finally percolating to the surface, to the depths of the corruption and the wasted. We see it as wasted. They've obviously saw it as purposeful to be able to take our taxpayer dollars and then funnel it off into special interest groups or individuals. The bullet train is a great example of the huge sums of money. Homelessness, the amount of billions of dollars of taxpayer money given off to our state and taken out of our coffers. And what are the results? The homeless problem has only grown significantly worse since these billions of dollars started pouring into the state 5, 6 years ago, even more than that in some cases. So accountability is absolutely essential, and we've got to change the way the rules in Congress and in the state. But as a congressional candidate and from the congressional level, it's different than being in the state level. Congress and Trump is doing a good job of taking the pressure. If you want federal tax dollars to funnel back into California, to force California to step up and start to fix these problems. Kevin Kiley is a great example of a congressional person here in California that helps bring that connection between what's going on in California to Congress and helps Congress pass legislation that will affect California and force California to improve its systems. But much of that has to come from the people we elect in California to go to the California Assembly and Senate. And people hopefully will begin to move away from just voting down on a ballot based on DNR labels. People have to connect the dots that in our state, we've been a supermajority controlled state by the Democratic Party for well over 20 years now. And supermajority means they don't have to even engage anyone from an opposition, which obviously is the only Republicans. There's no independents in office. They just have done and passed bills and laws and lacked oversight that allowed the results. We live in the results of all the policies they have passed, and they just keep getting worse. And people overwhelmingly just vote party line because they think because of the Democratic principles or whatever they're told about the Republicans, they just continue to vote Democrat and without connecting the dots and saying those Democrat leaders have given us this stuff in our state that we have to live with.
Right.
It's the most expensive for energy, housing, taxes. Our infrastructure is falling apart, and they just keep putting the same people back in office because they happen to call themselves a Democrat instead of creating solutions. And people have to change the way they think about voting and vote for solutions. And the only way we're going to start with that is getting Republicans in there to bring a counter narrative and make these issues come to the forefront, come out in public. Right now, they're all done behind closed doors.
Hmm. You know, if I had a time machine and I were to go back into the early 1960s and I saw a candidate by the name of John F. Kennedy who ran as a Democrat, I'd probably identify as a Democrat back then because I liked things that John F. Kennedy stood for. And I've heard a lot of brilliant people today say that if John F. Kennedy were alive and well here today now, he wouldn't align with today's Democrat Party, that he'd be more towards a Republican based on his values and the things that he stood for. And so
Absolutely.
there's really there's a shift of thinking in the what people really believe in their deep in their heart and their morality and in the way that they were raised, the way that they feel that their communities should look. And I feel that that's a massive transformation that we're seeing in the Great Awakening all across our country. So speaking of Kennedys, I know you had mentioned earlier you really loved when RFK, when Bobby Kennedy linked arms with President Trump, so that way they could join forces together to help make America healthy again. So, what can you say is some of the things that you really like to see happen when it comes to the health and wellness of people in America?
Well, our food has been poisoning us. Uh, People have had the pleasure, the opportunity to travel. You know, you can go over to Europe and you can eat a meal there and you feel significantly better and different than when you're here eating the average meal in America, where you feel sluggish and tired afterwards. The amount of pesticides and chemicals used in the growing of our food and the way our soils have been treated so that uh, the nutritional value of our food today that's grown is significantly reduced. Example is when I was a kid growing up, a carrot. Today you would have 8 or more carrots that would equal the nutritional value of one carrot I used to eat as a kid. And you can taste it in your food. You go get a tomato from a grocery store that's buying it from these mass producers versus if you go buy one at a farmer's market that's locally grown in somebody's small yard or plot, you could taste what a tomato is supposed to taste like and the
Right.
nutrient richness of that versus the depleted where you don't even know it's a tomato if you couldn't see that it was red and it looked like a tomato. It has zero taste and almost zero nutrient value to us. So what Kennedy has done and has led is this shifting in the understanding that we have to focus on how to grow nutrition rich food, how to grow the cattle and the proteins that we eat, how we raise those so that they're have very little antibiotics and use of these kind of chemicals to keep them and make them fatter and grow and have them in these barns where they're living in excrement and having to have no free range. Uh, the diseases and the things that are done to keep them from dying or their sickness so they can just get them to market. Uh, the chemicals that are used there, then how they process the food, the amount of chemicals used there. There's over 1,000 chemicals banned in the EU for food processing and that are allowed here. And it's always about adding chemicals, pesticides, and these things to increase profits, increase the shelf life, make it look prettier, be able to grow or raise more pigs in a smaller area. Uh, all of these things have, you look around and our culture, our people are sick in huge numbers in comparison to the rest of the world. So focusing on growing healthier food, eating healthier food, changing the food chart, the pyramid, the food pyramid, all of these things that have created a very sick culture that feeds the medical industry. Uh, and so Maha is quickly changing the dialogue and the focus in our country on health and how do we become healthy again. And you know, from the Bible, and I know you believe as I do, I have a great faith. There's a lot of stories and characters in the Bible that live to be 100, 140 years old. And you wonder, and you have to ask yourself, they were drinking pure water, eating food that didn't have, all these, hormones and
Pesticides.
pesticides
Hmm.
in the food that they were eating. And you think about it, they had pure food, water, air, maybe we would be living to 140. And they were constantly moving and active versus being most of our jobs are sedentary. Uh, and so I
Right.
believe
I think about
it's,
that all the time, Michael. I say that
yeah,
all the time. How did all these people within the Bible live so long? It's because their environment was pure or more pure, way more pure than it
way
is
more
now.
pure. Yeah.
Yeah, and God's creation could flourish a lot longer than it is now. It's being infiltrated, and it's been profit over people has been the motto of our country for far too long,
Yeah,
and that's
everything's
great.
about making more profit. And how can we make more profit? It's all about marketing and more profit,
Mhm.
profit driven. Uh, a lot of people will shuffle off the idea, oh yeah, 140 years ago, but they didn't have the same calendars, et cetera, et cetera. And I say, no, they did it by seasons. They counted, they know they went through a cycle from one summer to the next. So maybe off in a couple of days if you were trying to track from one year to the next. But in terms of years, the cycles of our seasons is how they counted the years, just like we would. So
Right.
the reality is they probably were living 130, 140 years because of the quality of the environment that they lived in that we have degraded so poorly here.
That's
Uh,
right.
and
Well,
so
Michael,
Maha's great.
yeah, Maha, I love what they're doing. I love what RFK is doing, and I just feel that all of our bodies, minds, our children, we all need the liberty to be able to have a clean environment, have quality food, have quality sunlight, have skies that aren't being dimmed by Bill Gates. We need those things to happen because that's on the minds of a lot of people. It's no longer conspiracy theory or fringe thinking. This these are topics that there's been Senate hearings, congressional hearings about, and that people are seriously looking at to have reformation and referendum upon. So that's great, Michael, that you think. So let's I want to get to know who is Michael Maxenti because I want people to know who you are, where you come from, and hear your story a little bit. So I do have your website. Just let me know if you want to allude to the website. But who is Michael Maxenti?
And I appreciate that question because we've been lied to by so many for so long. These people who come before us to be elected, and they're what career politicians almost always, or there's somebody who became a famous through something they did, or they acquired a lot of money through the success of a business and could buy their ability to become famous and well known. Well, I'm not famous on any level. But I'm first and foremost, I'm a father. I've got two kids. I've got four grandchildren. I'm a native Californian, born and raised in the South Bay. I moved here into this District 47, coincidentally, 50 years ago. I have lived in this district for 50 years where I raised my family. Uh, I was came here, I was in the printing industry, and I was able to rise up and become the youngest president of a division of American Standard at 33. I was a COO for a joint venture for Nissan Corporation, oversaw building and launching a manufacturing company for them here in Irvine. Then I took an opportunity that came along. My son, I was gifted with my son late in life after his mother and I had lost two children early in our marriage. And I had made a promise to God in a prayer after we lost that second child that if I was blessed with another child, I would put being a parent ahead of making money uh, or anything else, that would be my number one priority. So when I was the COO of that joint venture for Nissan at the time, when my son came along, and 7 months after he was born, I realized that I could not be the father I wanted to be and continue to report to Tokyo and run this company. It was a lot of hours every week, and I walked away from an income that I made in 1991 of $320,000. In 1991,
Wow,
I
that's
walked
great
away from
money.
that. Yeah, that was my salary and bonus I walked away from that in 1992, in October of 1992, to fulfill a commitment based on, I've always tried to live my life based on principles and commitments. And I made a commitment to God and a promise, and He gifted me with my son. So I fulfilled that. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I spent 6 months, and because I'd come up through the marketing side of the business and I loved that. And when I was hiring over 100 and some employees to launch that business here in Irvine, I saw the immense misunderstanding of what it was to live in California, et cetera, even back then. So I came up with the idea that I was going to start a publishing business. I started a publishing business, started one man. I published 3 books, then realized I couldn't make enough money with those 3 books to continue the lifestyle that my wife and I had become accustomed to, because we had built a custom home in Laguna Beach on a hill there, a big home. And so I then went in and bought a very small little magazine that was in Anaheim called Anaheim This Week. I bought that little magazine. And over the next 17 years, I built it into the second largest tourism publishing business in California. And uh, and the publishing was great for me to be a father, because I would take my son to school every day, pick him up at 2:30 in the afternoon. I coached 18 sports teams in Laguna Beach, from soccer and baseball and basketball, and then I also had a club baseball team. And while I was doing that, I was on Children's Hospital Board of Directors for 14 years, which I'd actually started before Michael even was doing that. But so it allowed me to be a parent. I think I was a good parent. I put the priority of not just my son, but his friends and other children ahead of things. And I was able to then work at night after he'd go to sleep. I'd work at my desk at my home office until, close to midnight, and get back up the next morning, get him to school, and do the same thing. And I built that up, into that business. But so that's a bit of my business background and who I am. But there's one of the things that is important for people to know, and one of the most difficult things uh, is to talk about becoming your own advocate. Now, it's been hard because we're taught as people of faith that your actions speak for who you are, not your words. That to be humble about who you are. But to run for office and to answer questions and for people to understand who I am, was a difficult transition to make, is to be able to become your own advocate and tell people of your story. Uh, and so a couple of the important parts is I've been somebody who's been able to solve problems, have a vision and solve a problem. I was made that president of that division of American Standard because American Standard bought this very successful company, put in some management that's changed everything. They started losing money. And that's when I was given the opportunity to say, okay, Maxsenti, you're so smart, because I'd become their star salesperson, turn it around. But I'd been with the company at that point 8 years. The average length of employment was over 17 years. So what I did, two major things. First thing I did was I brought 240 of the employees together on a retreat, uh, and said, look at folks, we all know how this company was once great. We've seen what they've done to take it and move it into losing money now. Our challenge today is to rewrite all the operating procedures and go and turn this company around. Uh, and I challenged the employees with it and empowered them how to do it. Uh, and we did. We turned that company around within about 9 months, rewrote all the operating procedures and did that. And second to that is, um, uh, so I could get a lot more detail there, but that was the important thing, is I brought the people in and empowered them how to do it, challenged them with the goal. And then that's why I was chosen to head up the COO and start this joint venture for Nissan. They wanted to create the finest graphic arts company in the world by blending the technology, the engineering technology of the automotive industry with the precision of manufacturing of the Japanese industry, with the creativity and ingenuity of the Americans. And so, again, I was challenged with how to do that. And one of the first things I did was set up, as soon as we got the plant built, hired some of the top people in manufacturing and sales in the country. We did exchanges. We have crews in different departments. We set our top crews and our crews from three shifts, one by one, over to Japan, and they would exchange and send their crews here so that we did a complete cultural exchange on site so that we worked side by side with each other in Japan and in Irvine so that we could learn from each other. And we brought in people from the engineering side of the automotive industry to work in our high tech and pre-press and some of these technical areas. And again, within 1 year, we were producing products at the highest level in the graphic arts industry in the world. Um, and and then those are two business examples. And then in the private sector, in the community, uh, I was on the board of directors at Children's Hospital. I was on the Padrinos board first for 9 years, and that was the fundraising arm for the hospital. And I'd been going to an event called Sportsman of the Year for a number of years. And then they had a program that if you were asked to be vice chair and you accepted that, then that meant you would be chairman for 2 years. So you had a 4 year commitment to this fundraising, which was the biggest event that they did for the year. And so I accepted that. I was vice chair, and I said, and I'd been going to the event for a number of years. And I said, hey, why in the world we're here raising money for the hospital? Why is this a men's only event? Why in the world aren't the wives and the mothers here? Oh, good idea. So we brought in that. We had the best year ever, raised more money, doubled the attendance. And then the next year I said, why are we giving these awards to people, athletes that the only time we ever saw them was when they came down to the hospital to do the filming for the day, come to the event. Uh, Famous athletes from the Rams and the Lakers and the Dodgers. Uh, and I said, why aren't we giving these awards to people who have given significantly of themselves to the community and will be here, that we're here helping others in the community before and after? Uh, and they said, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, as you have a suggestion, yeah, why don't we give it to Jackie Joyner Kersey? By the way, we've never given the award to a woman. By the way, she just happens to be of color. And oh, by the way, she just happened to win a couple of gold medals. And she lives here in our community in Mission Viejo, and she's been giving back to the community in volunteerism and all kinds of things for years. She's an incredible example of a wonderful human. Oh, great. Again, we set new records and all that. And so we're at the next board meeting, and everybody's going, wow, this we going through the financials. That was the biggest and greatest event again. Okay, Maxsenti, are you going to chair it now? And I said, yeah, but I got another idea. Well, what's that? And I said, well, I want to kill that idea and I want to replace it. We're the charity elephant in the room. We can not only make more money for ourselves, but we can also set an example and help bring a highlight and a spotlight to some of these great struggling charities that are doing great work for kids like Orangewood and Olive Crest and dealing with abused kids and women that are being abused. And and the board would say, no, no, just make another tweak or two. And I said, I'm not going to accept being chairman and just continue doing what we've been doing. I think I have a better idea. Well, the president smartly tabled the event, tabled the vote, because I wasn't given in and the board wasn't. So the next week, O.J. Simpson murdered Nicole. And immediately there was conversation about maybe we're putting athletes on pedestals they don't deserve. And that gave me 3 weeks to refine my idea. And I was, bless his heart, a guy named Joel Rubenstein. I always want to give credit to Joel. Joel had become a mentor of mine. He was the director of marketing for the '84 Olympics, and he was Peter Uberoff's right-hand man for marketing when he started his company, Mr. Foster, all the way through. He was a brilliant man. So I went to him. We started having regular discussions, and together we refined the concept. So at the next board meeting, I brought it up and I said, okay. And then I told him about an idea called Heroes of the Heart and how we would honor people in the community who had given significantly of themselves for the betterment of our community. And we would pick an athlete or an individual, a celebrity, but not just an athlete, who'd done the same. And they would be the featured award winner. William Bennett, who had written the Book of Virtues. William Bennett was a major political figure in the Republican Party. He'd been touted as the next most likely Republican candidate for president in the early 90s, 94. And I had been introduced to him, and because I was working already in some political things. And so William Bennett came out and gave the keynote speech. We sold out the Hilton Inn, a brand new Hilton hotel of 1,000 people. made 50% more money than the event had ever made. It was a big success. We continued that event for the next 6 years. And during that period, the concept of local heroes, that was February 27th, 1995.
Wow.
6 years later, the concept of local hero had become ubiquitous nationwide. Every local radio station, newspaper was giving out local heroes awards and focusing on recognizing people who were giving significantly of themselves for their communities. And so a woman friend of mine who had a PR agency, she came to me with an idea for a new event at the hospital. And she said, would you help me get the board to accept it? Because I now was on the foundation board as well. And and I took it to the next board meeting and I said, I want to introduce this concept, Chalk Follies, and I think it's time to kill Heroes of the Heart and replace it. And everybody's going, ah. Well, Chalk Follies ran for 25 years, made more money than ever. It changed the whole dynamic. But so you got to have a vision. You got to have the strength to take it forward, engage people to help you create it. You may have the vision, but now you got to engage people to solve the problem, create it, and then know when to move on and go on to the next thing. Uh,
Right.
so
Re-
those are some of the things about me in the background. I've talked way too long, and I apologize for that. But
No, Michael, it's great because you have to sometimes self-reflect and the way that, your journey has been throughout your personal and business career because it's all of those different milestones that are tools that you can then carry with you into American politics and government because that's what the problem is they keep using the same playbook. They keep using over and over the same things that are not working on behalf of we the people, and it fuels corruption. It feels low efficiency. Things aren't going in a direction for prosperity, and that's what I feel like the whole "Make America Great Again" concept is finding real Americans and real people who want to analyze all of the inefficiencies within the system and bring their own expertise to be able to change things for the betterment of all of the people, all of the constituency, no matter left or right. Like we all have to live here together, but we all share so many same common interests of living in America and living in California. So I think
let
it's a
me,
great resume.
yeah, let me add something that's important for the audience to understand, to know really another layer of who Michael Maxenti is and why I am somebody that hopefully they can trust. I've got the proven experiences in business and in the community of creating things, solving problems, and that. But to the depth of my commitment to our country, because I've been a person who tried to live my life always based upon principles, trying always to speak the truth, and I love our country and our people deeply. I got in 2008, 9, because I want people to know I'm not just some well-to-do white guy who comes along who thinks he wants to solve problems and that. We've heard that type of thing by many, but they don't understand what our struggles are. And when I say our struggles, I mean the ordinary working people and families in our communities that are struggling every day. I did have a position of relative wealth. I did have traveled the world, got all kinds of things. God wanted me to immerse me and take my journey to a different place so that I could go from that position of relative wealth and being nothing more than a voyeur of the struggles of most Americans. Because we talked about cost before. I never had to think about what it cost. I'd go into a clothing store and I used to wear the finest clothes. I never had to look at a price tag when I went into a store. I was making, as I mentioned, 320. I made $100,000 in income at 27 years old and never looked back from there. Uh, I didn't have to look at those price tags. But after I got a divorce, which cut things in half, then the recession of 2007, 8, 9, and 10, my business, which had been on a growth curve and a profit upswing for 14 consecutive years. Now all of a sudden flattened out, and we actually lost money in 2008 and 9. And uh, I had a choice to make then. I sold my home rather than taking on debt to invest in my business, get involved. I started a nonprofit called Rebellious Truths, which is another story. But I sold my business after getting involved in a political reform effort in 2010 and deciding that there was, after learning the depths of the corruption that was behind the problems that consumed the leadership of both parties back in 2010, uh, I decided to commit my life to helping reform our government because I had been reflecting on back a few years earlier on the sacrifices of my father and his generation. My father was in World War II. He flew in the backseat of a two-man glider into France. He was in the Battle of the Bulge. He was in the first Army unit that came upon the Mingelese prison camp where they did all those horrific experiments on the prisoners. He was 90 miles west of Berlin on VE Day. And the trauma that he and his survivors that lived through it talked about, he only shared that and talked about that annually when we went to the reunion of survivors of his army unit. And I was reflecting on those stories now, many years later, and of their sacrifice, and so many people that had sacrificed to give me this an opportunity to live this great life. And I was in that first lottery for Vietnam. Before I'd even graduated high school 2 years earlier, two of my classmates had already died and been killed in Vietnam. I entered San Diego State to play football down there. And by the time I left 4 years later, many of the guys had died that went off that I knew, and others that had come back had been severely wounded and were never the same. One of my best friends was a machine gunner on a helicopter. And I was thinking of their immense sacrifices and how lucky I had been. And that's when it struck me as I was watching our government bail out the banks in 2009 and 10 after they'd sold us on this TARP program that was going to bail out toxic loans. They could have given that money and bailed out the homeowners who had lost their jobs in the recessions, who had been decimated by this corrupt banking system that had gotten corrupt. Instead, they chose to give all that money to the banks and bail the banks out, who gave the executives bonuses even. And yeah, they paid those loans back with interest. But the banks were bailed out, and millions of Americans had lost their homes, their only asset. And that angered me. I was angry at this. What in the world is going on? And then over the next 6 months, I'm watching that same government, my party and the other, can't come together and create a quality healthcare system for Americans despite our immense wealth. And that's when I turned to Kelly and I said, I've got to figure out what in the world's going on. Uh, and so I started getting up. I thought I was going to get up the next morning. I got up every day at 4:30, spent an hour every morning dedicated to research to figure out what in the hell is wrong. It quickly came to the light that it was the corruption behind the leadership of both parties that was at the root causes of these things and why our government was doing what it was doing and all these wars and everything. And that's when I got involved in the politics, which is for another story. But the point I wanted to make is after committing myself to this reform effort in 2010, starting a nonprofit, I put $500,000 in cash into it to fund it. I made a commitment in 2013 that there was nothing more important that I could do with my life than to help reform our government and get the vast resources of our government out of the hands of corrupt leadership and the special interests and on behalf of the American people and help us go back to our founding principles and be that light on the hill to lead, to help lead others, help show them a path to their freedom because everybody's on a different place in their evolutionary timeline culturally. And I sold that business to an investment banker after offering it to my employees who could not come up with the down payment. I'd made them a sweetheart deal to buy me out so that I could go devote myself full time to this. They couldn't do it. An investment banker heard about it. He comes in and said, I'll match that offer. And I said, okay. So I sold it to an investment banker. I carried back the paper, which I was going to do for my employees who I'd known some of them for 15, 16 years. I trusted them and I didn't do my due diligence. on this investment banker that I should have, sold to him, carried back the paper, went off on all these things with Ross Perot working on all this reform effort. A year later, he was supposed to start making payments on the principal. He defaulted, never did. I had to hire a law firm. We won this big 7-digit, settlement. Never was collected on. My wife and I, in August of 2015, realized that we had lost our retirement in total. And then I was faced with what to do. Do I go back into the corporate world with my resume and all the people that I'd known in the business world and walk away from a commitment that and thought of all those sacrifices of my father and my friends, and I'd made a commitment to do now what they had done. And my wife referred to me as living, Benjamin Button's life in reverse because I got to live the life that they died for as 19 and 20-year-olds that I got to live. And so a friend of mine in a Bible study said, Maxsenti, why don't you go drive Uber? Why don't you take your Social Security early? So in September of 2015, I did those things and I started driving Uber to stabilize my wife and I because I didn't want to put on my family or friends of our problems because everybody deals with those problems. But we were wiped out our retirement, had zero retirement now that we were counting on. So I drove Uber. I drove over 4,000 rides for Uber. I worked for a year and a half for a limousine service. And then the owner came to me and said, Maxine, you become our number one driver. Everybody wants you as their driver, but you're always going to these political meetings, conventions. You've got Zooms, you're doing all this stuff. You're always turning down drives. And you got a choice, either quit the politics or quit the company. I shook his hand, said, thank you. And I walked away and I started my own little driving service. And I did that, and I still occasionally give drives so that I could stay in this effort to reform our government. And I've turned to Kelly many, many times over our struggles since 2015. And I said, I've never had to eat a meal yet out of a ration can. I haven't spent a night in a rainy foxhole. If this is as tough as it gets, bring it on. My and I look at it that way. And so I've stayed in this effort. And that's where I want people to know they can trust me that I didn't do this for my self-aggrandizement. I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this to be one of those soldiers on behalf of our nation, to give my children and future generations the same opportunities or better than that I had. And I want to ensure that, and I'm going to do everything I can till I can't.
That's great, Michael. And I want to share with our audience for a moment your website because I feel that it's important for them to be able to know where they can find you because I feel that if they're taking something away from this conversation today and they see somebody who they want to support, and especially if they live in your district, that they know where to find you and where they can learn more about you and decide how they want to support you. So let me just share the screen here. URL is maxsentiforcongress.com. Michael
Yeah.
Maxsenti for Congress.
And I'm glad that you asked to share the website because, as I've mentioned, and as you now know from the just opening up and sharing with you where we're at, I am not the typical candidate. I'm not famous and I'm not rich. And it's been difficult to get those people who have the resources, the wealth, and the people who control the levers of power to give endorsements, et cetera, within the political party, the Republican Party that I'm very proud to be a member of because of its founding principles. Uh, so our website and everything we've done has been done from a very grassroots standpoint. If you go back up for a second to the top there for a minute.
Sure.
So we've had a couple slogans. Right now, if you go to our website, it's right now in total redesign, going to be relaunched in about 2 weeks. But we had to do everything on a shoestring because, and most of the work was been done by volunteers because I could not self-fund to the degree that all the political people would love. Can you self-fund with $1 million or a couple $100,000? No, I'm still driving people to LAX and doing drives. And most everybody who came on and helped me on this campaign have been doing it as volunteers. So we've done it on a shoestring. And so people, when they compare it to some of these others where they had a lot of wealth and fancy, no, it's not one of your big, wealthy, fancy websites. my magazine website was significant more than that. But and originally it was the slogan was yes we can slashed out because we've heard that over and over again. Will. And it's just I'm not saying I'm going to go there with it and I can because can means there's an out. I'll come back to you when I say I can and say, gee, it was the other party's problem, or gee, I couldn't do this. No, when I make a commitment, I'm making a commitment that I will do everything I can think of and bring together all the resources possible to do it. I'm not going there with an excuse to come back to you in 2 years to tell you why I couldn't do it. I'm going to go there with the attitude, we will do this and lower the cost of living, advance the MAHA agenda, and bring accountability to DC. Now we've changed that slogan to putting people over policy. And that is my commitment, is to always put the people over policy. And the example I gave earlier about TARP and about our Obamacare, people now can see the results of that, of what's happened to the American middle class when they got wiped out while we bailed out the banks who've only gotten richer. They see the devastation of Obamacare, how it's driven up our costs dramatically. And what has it done for our health? Our health continues to get worse, doesn't get better. Those two things are examples of the difference of they put policy over people. I'm going to reverse that. And there's other good people in Congress. I'm not naive. I've been in this political reform working with people inside of Washington from the no labels and others. There are a lot of good people elected who, unfortunately, because of the system as it's evolved, cannot stand up against the establishment and enough to do it. Myself and others are going there with a commitment to do these things, work together, and make these changes in our government. And if you would, to that point, go to issues. Well, scroll down a second, and so people can see. There's my story down there. That video we just reshot 2 days ago will be up. But it took a while for me to be willing to accept a harness and a saddle to contain my passion for problem solving in our country. But we're changing that video. It'll be out, like I said, within 2 weeks. Go ahead and scroll down for people if they really want to see some pictures of me earlier. And this is at a meet and greet. And if you go over to go ahead and scroll on down, and they'll see some pictures that I'm proud of my family. Go over to learn more about Michael if you would. Click on that. And they can read a little bit more of my story, and they'll see that there's a few of the pictures there of my family. That's me back in Hermosa Beach at my grandparents' house in Hermosa, and me and my high school senior picture, my brother and I. I had hair back after I quit playing football. I got some long hair. That was typical. I lived through that summer of love in the 60s in that period. And those are my son up in Yellowstone. And over here's my daughter and three of my grandchildren. We're big Angels and baseball fans. And that's my lovely wife, Kelly. And this is from Heroes of the Heart event. The first event there on the left is William Bennett, the keynote speaker. The next year, Tiger Woods came down, and the only non-golf event he did while at Stanford University was to come down to Children's Hospital of Orange County and accept our Heroes of the Heart Award in our second year. Janet Evans was the recipient the first year. And that's a picture of me with Ross Perot back in 2012, and David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. He and I have been working together since 2011, and he is my economic advisor to this day. And I'm proud to have him as one of my endorsements and help fund the campaign. There I was at an unrigged summit in Nashville, going to try to unrig the system. There I am working with Bobby Kennedy as I became one of the Orange County, one of the state, and on the national leadership team. There I was when I was president of the Little League at opening day, giving a little talk there in Laguna Beach, where I was president of the Little League. And there I was leading a rally, a protest rally. We had this big banner, "We are all Americans," as we were protesting the issue of censorship. That was at the 4th of July parade in Huntington Beach.
What
And
year was this, during COVID, or was this before that?
oh no, this was back, would have been 2000 and roughly 14,
Kind of like
15.
the around the Tea Party days. Yeah, that
Oh
was.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was honored to be a speaker at a big Tea Party rally up at the Federal Building in LA with over 4,000 people. Got to be honored to speak right behind Dennis Prager. Uh, and then that's when I had the nonprofit called Rebellious Truths. And that was what I founded in January of 2011 and with my co-founder. And our slogan was to bring the light to truth, seeking justice for all. And that's been what I've been working on to this day, uh, is how do we bring the light to truth and seek justice for all. And so that's a little bit of the website. Hopefully some of those will be there in the new website. I haven't seen it yet. They're working on it. They're going to wait to show it to me after they've got it to they think will work. But go up to the issues, if you will, because there's a couple of key things I'd like to point out to people that I'm working on. If you scroll back up to the top and click on issues,
Sure. Let's see here.
right there at the top, there are issues right next to Meet Michael.
Let's see. Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, at the
Hold
very
on.
top of the scroll
Very
bar.
top. Oh, okay. I think it's, oh, there it is. Okay.
Issues.
Issues. All
Issues,
right.
not, yeah.
Okay.
Uh, Open up, well, we talk about affordability. That was the number one topic. And I did this about 8 months ago. Uh, but scroll down to congressional accountability because these are some very specific items that get talked about over and over for years and never get passed, or versions of them that do get passed, they've already figured out how to get around them. I list here 6 very specific congressional things that I will help work towards in Congress. The No Congressional Insider Trading Act, where, as it says, allowing families and them to profit off the laws they write. Lifetime Congressional Integrity Act. We've got to close that door uh, for these people in Congress to go along, to get along, so that they can have these great paying jobs when they leave Congress. And part of the problem we've got is we've got to change the incentives so that people who do get elected won't be incentivized to cave in to the money and the special
The,
interests and the
the
leadership
lobbies. Yeah.
and the lobbyists. This No Congressional Cronyism Act, ensuring families stay out off the corporate rolls, fair elections and anti-corruption. I'm not going to read them all, but Congressional Accountability Act. These things I will help focus on. How do we change the laws to end this cycle of corruption and change the incentives so that human nature doesn't take over? Because people don't realize somebody like myself who's coming out of the grassroots, who's not famous or rich, it's a big sacrifice. Just to come from nowhere to get elected is a 2 year commitment. I had to stop. I gave off to 3 drivers my business, 95% of my business I gave away. I only kept doing occasional drives because the campaign is first and foremost. But I didn't want to walk away from 100% of my business. But I'm walking away from 2 years of that. I get elected. If I can get reelected, which means hopefully I've earned the trust and demonstrated that I've done what I'm telling people I'm going to work on, after 6 years in office and 2 years to get elected the first time, after an 8 year commitment, I'll get a 10% pension, a $17,400 a year pension. So if I was younger and I was asking somebody, because we should have lots of people in Congress in their nothing less than 30, but 30 to 50 where they've got life experiences, they've proven their capabilities to go to Washington to be like our founders. But you're asking them to step out of a career job. Like I said, if I would have walked out of that career job in my 40s when I was making over $300,000 a year back in 1991 and 92, you're asking somebody who's got proven capabilities to walk away from that kind of income to go to a job that pays $174,000 a year, rips you away from your family and your friends, and you can't coach teams, you can't do any of this stuff, and then walk away 6 years later and go back into the business world on a 17 and with a $17,400 a year pension. So you put people in a position where they are very vulnerable when they're looking at it and saying, hey, I'm dealing with all these big, huge multinational corporations making decisions that are improving the lives of millions and millions of Americans. And I'm decimating my family to do this. So,
Yeah,
and again, at my age and my position, I can work on these laws because I can change them because I'm obviously not going there for a career. And so that's one of the big things is also not only changing the rules to end the corruption, but changing the incentives that incentivize those that we elect to put them in a position where they are very vulnerable to human nature. So that's something I wanted to point out that people aren't aware of. And I wasn't really thinking of it until I actually started making the decision to run and go, well, I can do this because uh, I'm I'm at my age and place in life that I can do this. I've got Social Security, I got pension, and I can come back and I've got my driving business there. If I need to still drive, I
sure.
will. You
Sure.
know,
So that's really interesting that you make these points and have a plan for that because everybody talks about politicians getting wealthy once they get into politics, and they shouldn't get wealthy. They shouldn't be doing any insider trading and things like that. But I never thought about the other side of the coin of if like let's say you legitimately, honestly are making a $500,000 per year in a salary from as an executive with a company and then to step down if you but to be a whole if you are a genuinely good person and you want to be a candidate and run to make a change. I didn't see the other side of that where you'd have to take a massive pay cut just to run in that or just to be in that position, that there should be some kind of an equal income amount for the duration that you are running, so your lifestyle doesn't, you don't make money, but you don't lose money. You can figure out a way to do it and then still
yeah,
carry on.
yeah, and those are exactly some of the types of things that I would bring together. I'm a big believer in citizens' assemblies. One of the biggest things our Constitution and our forefathers did was created a system that they recognized that the challenges of our frontiers were going to be vastly different than what they obviously were facing.
Right,
They didn't know
right.
what they would be, but they knew we were going to have vastly different frontiers. And they also knew people's consciousness was going to continue to grow. So they created a system to be evolved to meet those challenges and changes. But that system has been ossified by the political parties and the special interest money, uh, so that we don't have constitutional amendments. We have these immense districts where they thought districts should be 30,000. So people were really connected to their community. Now we have districts, my district's like 750,000 people. I've got 465,000 registered voters to try to
Wow.
represent. And yet Congress was originally designed for the House of Representatives to represent the people's interest in numbers like 30,000. But with technology and programs like citizens assemblies that are being used in over 100 countries around the world to this day, we could use so that even though we funnel it down to 435 members of Congress, we could have citizen assemblies. And one of the things I want to do and I'm committed to doing in my district right after election is I'm going to create citizens assemblies. And the way, just real quick, how they're done is it's the reverse of how juries are selected. It's done with a random process, so that you get a real true cross section of people, and they're brought in to help create a citizen's answer to problems. And there's some great examples about it, but that's for another podcast. But
Sure.
citizens assembly so that the citizens truly have an impactful, meaningful voice. And that's one of the biggest problems I've witnessed in Congress and in it and at the state level too, is that they pass laws that are written from a position of a voyeur's position at best, people who've come out of privileged backgrounds who've not lived in the trenches. They've not lived in this, and they don't bring the people that are going to be affected by the policy into the decision making. They try to write it from a top down perspective, and then they wonder why in the heck it doesn't work. When I worked for 18 months to get a friend of mine off the streets as a homeless person who had once been one of the leading award-winning designers in advertising in the advertising country in the world. Um, lots of drugs hit him and all. He ended up homeless. I worked for 18 months driving out to San Bernardino, trying to get him off the streets and get him back into the system, to get him back into Social Security and stuff. He was 70 years old. And the bureaucrats, and I talked to you, you don't have a clue the system you've developed. They can't do what you're asking them to do. And so, anyhow, legislation needs to be written in combination from visions of what we want to the people that have to live with it and create a solution for the problem that actually works, not in theory, but works in reality. And if it's not working, you constantly monitor it and either change it so it works or you eliminate it and you try a different path. You don't stay on like we have all these programs that have been around for years and years and years, and they don't solve anything, and yet they absorb more and more money every year because Congress doesn't do its oversight. And I'm going to go there with an attitude of sense of urgency. Let's get these things, they either work or they're gone, and we come up with a new solution, you know.
Oh yeah, that's something that we'll never have a shortage of, which is government waste, fraud, and abuse. So there's always room
Yeah.
for improvement, Michael. So hey, sir, I just thank you so much for joining the show today, folks. If you're watching this episode and want to support Michael, please visit his website. You can see all of the ways you can contact him through email and phone numbers for Michael. And yeah, we'd really, and, he could use all the support he can get. And please like, share, and subscribe. Send this video out to people. If you have friends and family in Michael's district down in 47 in Orange County, send this over to them because I think that they should really get to know Michael Maxsenti and what his plan and his mission is once elected to United States Congress. Michael, we'd love to see you back on the show, my friend.
I'd love to be back, and we've got a lot of work to do, but together we can make it happen. And we have a clear path to victory in this district with the support of the Republican Party and the Team Kennedy folks. We have a clear path to victory here to be an example that this kind of coalition, when people come together, we can create solutions and we can win seats and hopefully help inspire the nation that this is possible and we're on a journey to fix our country.
Amen to that. And that's what I want. That's what we all want. We all want a better country for our children and our grandchildren. So, thank you for your time, sir. Thank you for all the years of dedication to service and putting people over your own livelihood in many cases. And thank you for telling your story today on the Ultra MK podcast, where together we are reversing the narrative. God bless you, Michael.
God bless you, Matt. Thank
All
you.
right. I'll be in touch with you, sir. Thank
Okay.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.